TheBlaze Radio Network. On demand.
It's Stu, and welcome to today's podcast. We are incredibly excited to bring to you another Twitter lynching. And we're really excited about it because that's all we do anymore. I don't know. Twitter, it's so funny. It's such a small percentage of Twitter, or people in the United States are actually on Twitter compared to the other social networks, but it seems to dominate the news conversation. We talk about what's the right way to approach these things. How do we deal with them? And we don't want to be just beaten up constantly by the left and we lose every one of these battles and they win every one of them. But on the other hand, we don't want to abandon our principles and say, hey, you shouldn't be firing people for jokes they make.
I think the third hour in the podcast today, the point I made about postmodernism, on why because you suggested something really. What I think everybody is. Like, let's here's how we can figure these things out. But I told you, it cannot work. It will not work because people don't understand postmodernism and they don't understand the goal of what some of these people is. And those goals happen now because the framework is changed. It's a postmodern philosophy. And until you understand that, you actually could be helping to destroy the Western way of life.
Bill O'Reilly joins us as well. I mean, whenever we have a media topic out there, it's always good to have Bill O'Reilly on.
Yeah, it's a Bill O'Reilly jihad.
Yeah, but it was pretty interesting and looked kind of at both sides of it. And I thought brought up some really good points. Also, some news on his book being the date change. I guess maybe he's afraid of you, or
no,
what do you think?
No. He's changing it because of Bob Woodward, which is the same thing that went through my mind was Bob Woodward is coming out. No one is going to be talking about any book other than Bob Woodward from now until about 2025.
So Glenn Beck, Addicted to Outrage 2026, you're thinking?
Maybe. We're thinking about a new release date.
Also, there was a real situation that happened in Idaho while we were doing the show.
We don't want to even preview it. The story unfolds live on the air. We got a very important update about halfway through the show, and Stu just couldn't keep his eyes off it.
I couldn't. It was a developing story. I think we covered it responsibly, but you get to listen and figure that out.
You'll have to decide on that.
And should you speak your mind when being without being taken out of context? Should that be something that's available to the American people? I really argue it should be. As Glenn pointed out, maybe it can't be. We'll get into all that. Here's the podcast for today.
Glenn Beck.
I'm going to plant my flag today in a hill that I have said many times, but we need to now defend this hill. More voices, not less. More voices, not less. It is not my place or your place to silence anyone. I'm going to have to check with our HR department today. I mean, I don't know if we have the latest fad worked into our employee contracts yet. The old retroactive, oops, I didn't mean to hire that person due to old tweets, and now the social media mob is dogpiling on us and pushing our face into the dirt clause. I don't know if... Do we need to update that? It feels like this should be the thing now for everyone that could be considered a public figure, because we're all public figures now. And if you're at a well-known company, well, you're doomed. If the social media mob has a cause or a torch to bear, then they're going to pick a person. They're going to scroll the Twitter feed and pray for any missteps. They're going to expose them all and then watch them burn. And some of them, we're going to feel really good about watching them burn. We are. It happened to James Gunn. Should it have? In my opinion, no. Disney knew what they were getting when they hired him. But beyond that, the guy apologized in 2012. The guy hasn't repeated any of it, and his apology was because he found it offensive, not because somebody outed him. But I don't know about you. Judge not, lest you be judged. Does anybody notice the fires that are starting to burn? I'm not a social media judge. I'm not a social media judge. I'm not a social media jury, and I'm not a social media executioner. We don't know anything about James Gunn. I don't know a darn thing about him. I know nothing about what he believes. I know nothing about him, what he is today, who he is today. I have no idea the circumstances surrounding something as the ridiculous, social media posts. And some of them are horrible, but I don't know. The mob won the battle and Gunn was fired. And this era of social media lynchings is now snowballing because now, finally, we're good at it too. Revenge. Yesterday, the New York Times announced that they had hired Sarah Zhang to their editorial board. Now, the New York Times, obviously very high-profile company, and Sarah is somewhat of a public figure. So, of course, the social media hit squad went into action, just as they do with us. Immediately after the announcement of her hiring, without missing a beat, some of Sarah's old tweets, 3 years ago, she tweeted some racial comments about white people, and they began to surface, and they are despicable. They're despicable. I suppose I could read them in several different ways. The New York Times dismisses them. They would not dismiss them if they were anything about transgendered or homosexual or black, Hispanic. They would not dismiss them. They would have never hired her. But that's them. That's them. Life is not about them. Life is about you. Life is about me. My life is about the decisions I make, not the decisions others make. I cannot control the New York Times. I am not going to change the people in New York. I am not going to change the people in Hollywood. I'm not going to do it. But they are changing us. I am not going to become them. But Glenn, we just got good at this. We're making an impact. We hated this. This was unfair and wrong when they were doing it to us. Should this editorial writer be able to work at the New York Times? Should they have fired her? I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know her. The New York Times issued a statement yesterday defending their hire. Firing her would only encourage this kind of behavior to continue to snowball. Well, if you base it just on that, you're right. However, I wonder if I were hired as an editorial writer for the New York Times, if they would have the balls to stand up like that for me. I highly doubt it. But again, that's them. Did you see the social media war that was going on last night? Did you see what it's doing to us? There were actual journalists, some respected, some not so much, actually defending racism. They were seriously trying to make the case that racism isn't racism as long as it's coming from a minority directed at the majority. That's insanity. Racism does not come from one race. Racism comes from all races. Racism is a human problem. So one of the most idiotic things I have ever heard, and I am not going over the cliff with the rest of humanity. I am planting my flag here. This is insanity. It is insanity to say that bigoted words are somehow or another not bigoted if they come from another race. That is wrong. I'm not going over the cliff with the rest of humanity. And I am also not joining the mobs demanding somebody be fired for something that they said on Twitter. You know who acted like an adult this week? CBS. Now, I don't know if they would have done it for anybody else except their CEO. Don't know if they would have done this for anybody else that was expendable. Don't know if they would have done it. I highly doubt it. If I were on CBS and these charges came up, I'd be gone. But you know what they did? They said, we have an independent counsel coming in to look into all of it. Look into all of it. And if we find it to be true and a problem and against our principles, we'll fire the person. If we can't get people to understand that racism is human, you really think you're going to get people to understand that hatred is human? That hatred and violence doesn't come from just one side? Because I have news for you. It doesn't. Anybody who thinks, well, our side isn't violent. Really? Watch. Watch. The left has had a long time to get good at it and be dismissed. Our side, I think, would be just as bad if we hadn't been called to task every step of the way. They've never been called to task. And God forbid, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but God forbid the tables ever turn. Because if this kind of stuff, if this continues the way it is continuing, we will round each other up. It just depends on who grabs the pendulum. The tribal nature that we are living in right now, this tribal community where we are headhunters, is so far beneath Americans, it's frightening that we don't see it. I don't know Sarah Zhang. Were her comments racist back in 2014? Yeah, they were. In fact, they were racist at any time. But I can't testify to what she meant, who she was, who she is today. Maybe the New York Times can. Maybe they can't. Maybe, I know this is going to go out on a limb, maybe the New York Times they're just hypocrites. After all, they did fire another journalist, Quinn Norton, earlier this year when old tweets surfaced about of her saying slurs about African Americans and gays. She was out. But I do know this. If we're ever going to get through all of this, if we're going to reach some kind of common ground, I'll forget all of that bull crap. Social media mob attacks are wrong. These are assassination tactics. Do we even know the difference between right and wrong anymore? Because it's not about them. I don't care about changing their mind. I'm never going to change the New York Times mind. Never. Never. Not going to change the minds of those who have a deep-seated hatred for the white culture. Not going to change their mind. They're not going to listen. But those people are not going to change me. If you've been listening to me for a long time, this is it. You are now on the other side of the threshold. And you are either going to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity, or you are going to stand. I refuse to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity. It is only going to get harder from here. You must exercise the muscles to be able to stand where you have always stood. We are not part of a lynch mob. No matter how good it feels, no matter how many times the other side has done it to us, I will not be that person.
It's Friday, August 3rd. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
cowardice? Was it cowardice? Was it indifference? One of the best known speeches from the Second World War began circulating in the 1950s. And there's different versions of it. Because it was a speech. It wasn't a poem. First they came for the socialists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Now you have to remember, socialists and communists were fighting. And so there's a debate going on whether Niemöller actually said socialist or communist. Most likely it was communist because that was the enemy of the state at the time, because they were national socialists. So was this yet another trick of historians trying to make socialists look like the victim here? Socialists were not the victim. Communists were the victim because the National Socialists rounded up the communists. So first they came for the communists. But remember, this is political. This is political. It was those people that were causing all of the problems. It was those people. They were communists. They're communists. They're working with Russia. They want to take over the whole world. Communism is evil. We're over here. We just want universal health care. We just want all of the things that they want, except we're not working for Russia. That was the difference. We are nationalists. We are German workers first. We are not workers of the world unite. Everything else was the same. The difference was international or national. And so first the National Socialists came to round up the communists. But if you were part of the National Socialists, you knew it was their philosophy that was going to end in disaster. It was anti-German. We have to round them up. And as long as I'm not part of that freak group, it's fine. Then they came for the trade unionists. Where were the people? Where were people when they started rounding people up? Communists. Well, the church didn't stand for the communists because the communists, they were atheists. Communists didn't like religion. Communism thought that religion was one of the bigger problems. These are opponents of our religion. If we don't round these people up, if we don't stop them, they're going to put us out of business. They're going to round us up. We have to stop the communists. So the churches didn't say anything because they were opponents of religion. They were the enemies of Christianity, any kind of religion, really, that wouldn't bow down to the Fuhrer. Within 6 months of the Fuhrer becoming the Fuhrer, they took down the pictures of Christ on the Christian altars and put a picture of the Fuhrer up. See, first they came for the communists who were trying to stop these guys and saying, no, that's not who they are. They're not your friends, Christians. But the Christians knew that the other side was worse, and so I'll just get into bed. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But as it turned out, they weren't really your friend, were they? Should I be my brother's keeper? I mean, look. These people are sick. They're incurable. We are having financial troubles. We've got wars going on. We can't afford to pay for those incurable diseases. They are just eating through everybody else's money. Your kid won't be able to have. Oh. Well, I guess out of concern, I do have a responsibility. And they are incurable. Next, they came for the incurable, and I said nothing because I was still close to a cure.
Glenn Beck.
This New York Times editorial writer that the New York Times refuses to fire, and in some ways, I say rightly so. In other ways, the other part of me says, "Are you kidding me?" But let's tear it apart. Let's look at these things and tear this one issue apart. Instead of just being outraged by it, let's look at it. Because remember, this isn't about them. This is about you. You cannot change them. But will you allow them to change you? So, are the tweets racist? Well, first thing we have to do is we have to define the word racism. So let's get the dictionary definition of racism out.
Couple different ones for you. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior.
Okay, so antagonism. Mm-hmm. I think we are being antagonized.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the belief that all members of each race possess characteristics or abilities specific to that race, especially so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races.
Okay, so I think those two, race superiority is in both of these, that there's a superior race in both of these, or they have traits of a superior race. Is racism a good trait or a bad trait, and a superior or inferior trait?
Racism's a terrible trait.
Terrible trait,
yes.
Right? Okay, so if you cannot be racist as a race, you are a superior race to the white culture. White people, are you not?
Yeah, I guess. If all white people are racists, then you
can't be because you're not white.
Then you are
superior.
Then you are superior, and you've actually turned yourself into a racist. This is like. Can God build something so heavy he can't lift it?
I don't think so. There's an actual answer to this one. Mm-hmm. There's actually an answer to this one. If you believe that no one in your race could be racist, and I just like to point out Louis Farrakhan, if you believe that someone in your race cannot be racist, that you can say whatever you want about another race, denigrating or, what was the word, antagonizing that race for being inferior. If you don't think that that is racism, then you are a racist by definition. Okay, so are the tweets racist? Here's the first step was define racism. Second step, are the tweets racist? Do you have any of her tweets?
I don't in front of me. I can pull them up, though.
Yeah, pull them up. Now, here's the thing. Stu is very good with this. He always checks himself on, wait a minute. Let me say that. Let's say that out loud before we jump on the bandwagon on something like, the 25% steel tariffs. Donald Trump's 25% steel tariffs are good for the economy. He's negotiating. Okay. Let's change one word in that and see if it would be comfortable to say. Obama instead of Trump. Obama's new 25% steel tariffs, good for the economy. He's negotiating. Would you have said that? No, none of us would have. Even if it was negotiation or take the negotiation out.
Yeah, the one that hit me with that was Barack Obama's about to go meet with Kim Jong-un one-on-one. What a great development. I don't think I would have said that sentence. Now, that might be because I was wrong about Obama. Right? It might be that I really should have considered
that you may have been right about Obama.
And right here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so the point is that it does give you the ability to take your own bias out of it. Mm-hmm. Right?
Or at least check it.
At least check it. Right. Exactly. It makes you stand up to your own opinion.
Yeah. It does this. It makes you think, Obama is going to meet with Kim Jong-un one-on-one. Nobody's going to be there with him. Okay, that makes me very uncomfortable. Why? Is it because of Obama, or is it because of his past with Marxism and cozying up to dictators? Okay, it's probably that. Now, Donald Trump also cozies up to dictators. So why was I a little more comfortable? because I think that Donald Trump understands capitalism, is a fan of capitalism, and is a fan of America. I didn't have that opinion. So while it's uncomfortable, I at least know why there's a difference.
And that controls the way you talk about Obama in that circumstance,
Yes.
right? When people were saying, well, he wants to meet with dictators, a big portion of the right's criticism of that is you never speak with dictators.
Right.
That wasn't like, hey, I wish a different person would go speak with dictators, or I wish I had a different president who I trusted that would go speak with dictators. It's insane to go speak with dictators at any time. And so I think at that point, if we would have looked back at that and said, okay, well, maybe that's not the way we actually feel. Maybe the way we feel is this particular president, because of some of his past behaviors, I don't find to be trustworthy on this particular mission.
Yeah,
so
I don't
that's
have
why
a
I'm
problem.
opposing it.
I have more of a problem with FDR meeting with Stalin than I did with Churchill meeting with Stalin. That's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different. One understood who Stalin was. The other one was playing footsie with him. So we have to look at the tweets. Now substitute the adjective, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, so you have this situation, like, for example, she tweeted, cancel white people. Hashtag cancel white people. So if you were to just insert the word black for white, would that be racist? Would you keep your job after that sentiment? And of course, the answer to that is absolutely not. And that's an easy one. And here's another one you talked about being inferior was one of the qualifications of racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are white people genetically predisposed to burn faster in the sun, thus logically being only fit to live underground like groveling goblins? Number one, I would agree with her tweet. I think it's probably true. We should live underground, and we are genetically predisposed to burn faster in the sun. However, again, that is a statement of generalities based on race and genetics. I mean, it's cool.
That one. I don't really even have a problem until she gets to groveling goblins.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
I mean, can you imagine saying that? Just say, should black people be? Should black people, are they predisposed to live underground like groveling goblins? Do you think that's okay to tweet?
Of course not.
Of course not.
How about
why? Because it's racist.
Oh man, it's kind of sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to old black men. Do you think if you meant that statement and I wasn't quoting and changing an adjective that I would be able to keep a job?
No.
In really any industry. Remember, there's people in Charlottesville who went to this rally and were racist and said things just like this, right? Mm-hmm. And went back to their hot dog stands only to lose their jobs. They lost their jobs at their hot dog stands, not New York Times columnist, a hot dog stand. You were not allowed to serve hot dogs to people if you went to the Charlottesville rally. Yet you can say you get joy out of being cruel to old white men and have a job at the New York Times. Now, that is not a fair standard. The question is which part of it is wrong.
Okay,
and that's where I think sometimes we fall down is on the right.
Okay, so we know that the tweets on the surface are racist, correct? We know what racism is. We know how to make sure that we are consistent in our belief. And if we're not consistent, why we're not consistent, just by changing it from black to white. Mm-hmm. We know that they are racist again because of that substitution. Now the question is she racist? Is she racist? If all you know about her is that she works for the New York Times, if you are on the left, you say, no, of course not. If you're on the right, with just that information, yeah, probably. Okay? That's subjective. That should be thrown out. Is she racist? Well, what do we know about her? We know the tweets. Well, the argument from the New York Times that they would not, this is a separate issue, they would not ever tolerate from someone like me, is that she was engaged in throwing crap back online. That somebody was attacking her, and then she attacked them, and then she said, man, do I love making old white people sweat, or whatever she said. Okay? Well, I guess you could say, do you have anything like that in your Facebook, or have you ever said anything like that? Have you ever really made somebody squirm online and go, man, it feels good to make these fill in the blank sweat?
I mean, I understand it, and I'm fine with it. And that's why I always err on the side of, no, you shouldn't fire people. And there probably will be comments that deserve firing. I mean, for any other race, these would absolutely deserve firing.
Yes.
Right? I mean, if someone said the exact same thing she said with inserting black people or inserting Jews or inserting anybody.
If you were white
and you
said these things.
Absolutely would be a fireable offense. And I think if you make a blanket policy that says no one ever gets fired for a tweet, you will make mistakes, probably. However, it's okay. I'd rather err on that side. I'd rather err on people keeping their jobs and people not being fired for tweets, even though some people probably should be in some, there's at least an argument for it. That's just not the right way to go. I'd rather err on the side of freedom.
Okay, I'm not going to fire somebody over their tweets. I'm going to fire them for real intellectual reasons. I mean, why hate somebody because of their color when you can get to know them and hate them for good, solid reasons? Okay? I mean, it's just so stupid. If you are tweeting something, I want to look at the tweet, and then I want to get to know you. We know nothing about Sarah. We know nothing about her. This could be true. This could not be true. I lean towards she's probably a racist because you just don't say those things unless you feel you're under attack and you feel you have a right to put people in their place. Does that sound familiar? Because you feel like you've been so attacked.
Of course, like if you apply that standard and give people a pass for angry reactions, you're going to get you got to go back and hire a lot of people from the past.
Now, the last thing is the New York Times. Are they racist? I don't know. I think they're postmodernists. I think that's what they are. I think they're postmodernists. I think they don't believe in the Judeo-Christian traditions of this world. And I don't mean like we're all a Christian nation and everybody should be in church. I mean the Judeo-Christian laws that gave birth to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I don't think that they are all with that. How could they be? They all run in the same circle with these eggheads from the universities who are telling us all of these crazy things. How could they be? So are you going to change the New York Times? Nope, not going to change them. Here's an idea. Why don't we look at this another way? Instead of getting everybody fired because they've said something out of anger, they're saying she was angry, and so she did this because she felt she had a right. Okay. Why don't we just back off of everybody? Why don't we just back off of everybody and say, you know what? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We are sitting here arguing about words. And they will tell you, well, you have to understand the context of the words. And, words are just words. Yes. Okay, that's good. Until you start saying this group of people starts to use this kind of language, and that causes all of these kinds of problems without recognizing the problems you yourself are causing because of your words. It's just really time to have adult conversations, and nobody in the media is going to do that because that doesn't give you ratings. If I wanted ratings today, I would be tearing the New York Times apart, and I'd have good reason to do it. That's not going to get you ratings. What's going to get you ratings is doing that, tearing them apart. What's going to save us as a people, what is going to save beyond the country, forget about the country. We are not even talking about saving the country anymore. We are talking about saving the Western way of life that gave birth to our country. That's what's up on the auction block now, the Western civilization. And if you want to do that, there have to be people who will stand up and say, I am not engaging in that. Because there has to be a safe place that people can come to with different points of view and say, man, I am tired of that too. I can't take it anymore. Thank God there's a group of reasonable people that are not lighting the torches and setting off as a mob.
Glenn Beck.
California progressivism never ceases to amaze anybody. Now San Francisco is trying a weird form of forced capitalism, which is an oxymoron. As usual, it's all about control. This time it has to do with the massive campuses of big tech companies and all of the on-site amenities that they provide their employees. Apparently too many amenities. It's too great to work at these places. So the city is working on an ordinance now to force employees at these big tech firms to go out for lunch. Now, if it passes, the ordinance will prohibit new campus construction from having a company cafeteria at all. You see, the problem, according to the city's progressive officials, is the campuses are just too cushy, too convenient, too insular. They're trying to force the employees from these companies to go away and stop getting those free lunches, you know, often gourmet free lunches that they're being offered as a perk of, you know, working at a particular company. They want them to go out into the neighborhood and support local restaurants instead. Well, now, San Francisco didn't come up with this brilliant plan on its own. Mountain View, California, has already banned Facebook from serving free meals at its new campuses that opens there this fall. But it gets better. Under the new proposed San Francisco law, current employees would be grandfathered in, so they could continue to use existing cafeterias. But new employees would be banned from using the company cafeteria. Oh, HR is going to love explaining this one. No, I'm sorry. You cannot use all of the perks. San Francisco is upset that these tech companies got, here it is, the crux of the matter. They're upset that these tech companies got tax breaks in 2011 to move into troubled areas of the city, this one called the mid-market. Several companies, including Twitter, Square, and Uber, moved in. But the neighborhood hasn't taken off. Why? Aaron Peskin, a city supervisor who is co-sponsoring the bill, says, well, these tech companies have decided to leave their suburban campuses because their employees want to be in the city. And the irony is they come to the city and then they're creating an isolated, walled-off campus. Now, this is not against these folks. It's for them. It's to integrate them into the community. Now, it could be that these progressives suddenly are all in love with a wall because their tech workers prefer not to walk out, to a local restaurant and, risk a shiv here and there or, getting jabbed with heroin needles by San Francisco's estimated 22,000 intravenous drug users. There is also the fact that, I should say this portion of the program brought to you by New Pooperoni.
Pooperoni on San Francisco streets.
So New Pooperoni, sure, it's delicious and it smells great, but maybe a wall would stop having the Pooperoni in my campus on my front doorstep. The city wants to ban the company cafeterias, and it just opened 2 safe heroin injection sites for the addicts. Sounds great. Progressive priorities. They never cease to amaze.
Glenn Beck.
Man, I'm excited to hear from Bill O'Reilly today because the news this week is, Bill, do you even recognize your country anymore?
I'm building a wall, and I hope I'm going to be able to eat in my kitchen, but maybe I'm not.
You maybe not. This portion of the program, again, brought to you by Pooperoni, the San Francisco treat.
Pooperoni on San Francisco streets.
So my question is, Beck, what would Carl Malden think?
I think Carl Malden would have thrown himself off the bridge years ago.
And where's Dirty Harry when we need him?
So let's start with, I think we need to start with the media, don't you, Bill?
Yeah, that's fine with me. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, so let's see. Do we start with the New York Times or CNN? Your call.
Let's go to CNN because I have a message of the day just posted on BillO'Reilly.com about Jim Acosta's display yesterday with Sarah Sanders. So if you didn't see it, if your listeners didn't see it, basically the CNN chief White House correspondent cajoled, word of the day, cajoled Sarah Sanders about Donald Trump's opinion that some journalists are enemies of the people. So Costa was demanding that Ms. Sanders give her opinion about the president's opinion. That's what it came down to.
Is that the role at all of the press secretary?
Of course not.
Yeah.
Press secretary is there, as Ms. Sanders eloquently stated, to reflect what the president says to the press corps so they can report it to the people, not to give her opinion. But what Costa obviously was trying to do is
create
drive a wedge between Sanders and her boss. And he was demanding, not asking, demanding that she give her opinion on the enemy of the people line. So, number one, that was just insane. And I'm sitting there going, what happened to Jim Acosta's bosses at CNN? Where are they? They should have been on the cell phone going, Jim, you better sit down because this is inappropriate and is embarrassing our network. But instead, as we've discussed before, this is the culture and the financial profile of CNN. This is what their people are ordered to do.
Let's play the audio here for anybody who missed it. Here's what Bill's talking about.
I think it would be a good thing if you were to say right here at this briefing that the press, the people who are gathered in this room right now, doing their jobs every day, asking questions of officials like the ones you brought forward earlier, are not the enemy of the people. I think we deserve that.
I think the president has made his position known. I also think it's ironic.
I'm
trying to answer your question. Okay, I politely waited, and I even called on you despite the fact that you interrupted me while calling on your colleague. I said it's ironic.
Which is why I interrupted.
I'm trying.
But if you finish, if you would not mind letting me have a follow-up, that would be fine. But
it's ironic, Jim, that not only you and the media attack the president for his rhetoric when they frequently lower the level of conversation in this country. Repeatedly, the media resorts to personal attacks without any content other than to incite anger. The media has attacked me personally on a number of occasions, including your own network, said I should be harassed as a life sentence, that I should be choked. ICE officials are not welcomed in their place of worship, and personal information is shared on the internet. When I was hosted by the Correspondents Association, of which almost all of you are members of, you brought a comedian up to attack my appearance and call me a traitor to my own gender. In fact, as I know, as far as I know, I'm the first press secretary in the history of the United States that's required Secret Service protection. The media continues to ratchet up the verbal assault against the president and everyone in this administration, and certainly we have a role to play, but the media has a role to play for the discourse in this country as well.
And sir, if you don't mind, if I may follow up, excuse me, you did not say in the course of those remarks that you just made that the press is not the enemy of the people.
Unbelievable.
Are we to take it from what you just said? We all get put through the ringer. We all get put in the meat grinder in this town, and you're no exception. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. I wish that had not happened. But for the sake of this room, the people who are in this room, this democracy, this country, all the people around the world are watching what you're saying, Sarah, and the White House for the United States of America, the President of the United States should not refer to us as the enemy of the people. His own daughter acknowledges that, and all I'm asking you to do, Sarah, is to acknowledge that right now and right here.
I appreciate your passion. I share it. I've addressed this question. I've addressed my personal feelings. I'm here to speak on behalf of the president. He's made his comments clear.
That's absolutely appropriate. Everything she said was absolutely appropriate.
Okay, so you know what I do. I not only analyze the news, but I give you the why of it, not just the what of it. And again, this is a post on BillO'Reilly.com if you want to read the whole thing. What Acosta is doing, in addition to pleasing his masters at CNN, and by the way, that's going to change once AT&T gets in there, because CNN's ratings are terrible and they're an embarrassment now.
Did you see the latest poll? This was actually posted just this week, and it's gotten very little play. That CNN is now the 9th trusted news source. The 9th.
Yeah, Trump has succeeded, and then CNN has helped them in demonizing the network. And I don't think that is a surprise. Mm-hmm. But getting back to Acosta, why is Acosta doing what he's doing? Well, he's following in the great tradition of Dan Rather and Richard Nixon and Sam Donaldson and Ronald Reagan. That's what Acosta is doing. Acosta knows that before Donald Trump, nobody knew who he was, wasn't making a lot of money. He was running around going nowhere. And he said, you know what, I really despise Donald Trump, and Acosta does personally. And so I'm going to make a career out of torturing him and haranguing his people. And therefore, that's going to catapult me onto the Glenn Beck program with Bill O'Reilly, and everyone will be talking about me. And my bosses will like that, so they'll give me more money. And since I despise Trump anyway, there's no downside for me. That's exactly what Jim Acosta is doing.
Could I give another version of that leads to the exact same place? He was a relative nobody. That nobody knew who he was. Sounds familiar, kind of like me. Relatively nobody knew who he was. But he actually believes this guy is a danger. And his bosses do too, and they let him go because they want to stop this trend of Donald Trump and what Donald Trump is doing. And so he just does it because he believes in his own mind, he's not doing it for money. He's doing it because he thinks it's the right thing to do.
Well, sure, and that's true. These zealots believe that Donald Trump is a danger to America, and therefore any vehicle that can diminish him or get him out of that office is legitimate, whether it's honest or not. That's true. They're true believers. Rather was a true believer. He hated Nixon. Mm-hmm. Donaldson was a true believer. He hated Reagan. I was there. I saw it. I saw it personally with my own eyes. Okay? So, yeah, that's fine. But there's supposed to be some kind of responsibility on the part of the press. And going in to try to embarrass on a daily basis a sitting administration with no intent of finding the truth about anything is corruption. It's simply corruption. And that's what you're seeing right before your eyes. You play that clip to Americans, the clip with Acosta and Sarah Sanders, and you do a poll on it. Sarah Sanders is going to win 70-30. You know, the 30 who hate Trump are going to side with Acosta. But rational, fair-minded people are going, the guy's out of line. She's under no mandate to give her opinion. And here's the final thing. Acosta doesn't care what Sarah Sanders thinks. Why would he care? Why would he care if Sarah Sanders thinks the press is the enemy of the people? I mean, he doesn't care. It's so hollow and phony. He's just using it as a staged mechanism to get himself on the Glenn Beck Radio Program.
So I doubt that's his goal. But let me switch topics, because one of the angles. One of the problems that I have, and I think the American people have, and we'll get into the New York Times debacle this week coming up in a second, but is the amazing lack of self-awareness that they are stirring the American people up using tactics that they said were terrifying, diabolical, and destructive to the state. That when Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck were on Fox News, we were a danger to the republic because of what we did in our 2 hours. And yet they're doing it 24/7, and they don't seem to recognize it. And stories like this are downplayed. Play the audio, please, Sarah, of the Representative Scalise, the guy who was shot by a leftist when they tried to kill 30% of our Congress. One guy, a Bernie Sanders volunteer, in 2017. He just had a new credible death threat. Listen to this.
You are taking ours. We are taking yours. Anytime, anywhere. We know where they are. We are not going to feed them sandwiches. We're going to feed them lead. Make no mistake, you will pay. Ojo por ojo, diente por diente. In Spanish, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That is our law. We are the majority. Have a good day. Those voicemails were reported to the Capitol Police, and in each instance, the Capitol Police traced those phone calls and those voicemails to an individual identified as Carlos Bayonne, age 63, of Grand Island, New York. Mr. Bayonne has been charged in a criminal complaint here in the Western District of New York with interstate communication of a threat.
We'll get Bill O'Reilly's comment on that and the New York Times and the rest of the news of the week when we come back.
Glenn Beck.
So, Bill, last night I was having dinner with my kids, and we were talking about this thing with Steve Scalise, and I said, he's got another threat, and it's credible. And My adult children at the dinner table said to me, Dad, who's Steve again? And I said, the congressman that was shot. When was he shot? He was shot at the baseball diamond. What baseball diamond? The baseball diamond a year ago when they tried to kill 30% of what? 30% of Congress they tried to kill. And it was a guy who was a Bernie Sanders. In my family, my older children didn't know. Now they had heard about it, but they didn't really know what the story was back at the time. Just thought it was no big deal.
I'm not sure they thought it was no big deal. I just think there's so much chaos in this country now every day, and people forget because they're just overwhelmed. I don't know your kids, but it would seem to me that they were interested enough to ask you about it now.
Oh yeah, no, they were shocked last night that this wasn't known by them and everybody else, and was a very big deal. 30% of the Congress could have been killed.
Yeah, it was covered when it happened. I thought responsibly, but I just think we're in a society now where it's just one atrocity after another. And people are just overwhelmed. They can't retain. I mean, if you ask about mass shootings, you're not going to be able to get folks to say where they were. Maybe they'll remember the Florida one, but, the others they won't remember because it's just too much. We live in a real chaotic time.
So when we go to, I know you have security. I have security. We've had it for a while. We've had the left in organized campaigns try to and effectively get you out. They tried for a long time to destroy me, and you could make a good case that they did a pretty good job on both of us. They don't see that as a problem. Now it's happening to them, and they seem to think that it's a problem.
Well, it's we're living in a time now where, because the press does not seek the truth about anything, that charlatans and dangerous organized zealots can level accusations, and corporations buckle because they don't want boycotts, they don't want sponsors this, they don't want bad Me Too publicity, whatever it may be. And everybody knows that. So it's a lot easier now than it was 3 years ago to destroy people. And every person I know, and I know them all, that gives opinion on television is in danger.
Yes. Yes, they are. We all are. All right. Bill O'Reilly. We'll come back with, I think, maybe the definition of racism first as we go to the New York Times story next.
You're listening to the Glenn Beck Program.
We do have breaking news, something that is, I think, really important, and we're trying to get somebody who is actually on the scene before the end of the show today. Stu, do you have that news?
Yeah, Joe Paris at KTVP in Boise has this update for you, and I hope you're following this. About 100 goats are on the loose right now in a Boise neighborhood. They are going from house to house, eating everything in sight. Nobody has a clue where they came from. Updates to follow.
Okay, so we'll give you those updates as they... When he started in, he said, have you heard... there's 100 goats. And he could have said, Glenn, there's breaking news. 100 goats have just been appointed as advisors to the 12 chairs of the Fed. And I would have been like, yeah, probably. That actually makes more sense than most of the news today. Bill... Let's go to the woman who is now on the editorial board of the New York Times. I'm sure you've read the tweets that she wrote. She's Asian. She wrote them about white people and how she likes to make old white people uncomfortable. And I think one of her hashtags was, what was it? White people die or something like that.
It's basically white men.
Yeah,
she doesn't like white men.
Yes. So, racist? Are those tweets? Let me take this and break it down. Are those tweets racist?
Yes.
Why?
They target a group of people based on skin color.
Okay. Question 2, is she racist?
I don't know. People do this to curry favor and to get themselves attention, just like the Acosta thing we're talking about. It worked in her case. She's hired by the New York Times to be on the editorial board. So it worked.
Is the New York Times, by knowing that she had written these things, are they racist?
I never do that because I just think throwing that R word around is not right.
Good for you. You answered this. You answered those questions exactly the way I did. Last question.
Good.
Last question.
Yes.
Should the New York Times fire her?
Well, I mean, should they? They never should have hired her in the first place. They know she is. I mean, they know. But again, let's go to the why. This is the O'Reilly formula on BillO'Reilly.com. The why behind it. Okay, so everybody who's sane is going, how could this happen? And this woman obviously is a hater. And how could she get this position at the New York Times? Well, if you know anything about that operation, you know their editorial philosophy is that white men have destroyed the country. That's white supremacy, white privilege.
May I go a step further? I said this morning that they're cut from the postmodernist cloth that says that the Judeo-Christian Western culture is the sickness that has swept the planet, and so anything that helped create that is bad.
Yeah, and who runs that culture?
Yes.
White men.
Right.
Okay, so if you look at their editorial policies, the New York Times wants open borders. They don't want any enforcement of immigration law. They want amnesty for everybody here. And if you show up and say, I need asylum, you get it. All right, so why do they want that? They know that already 20 million people have entered the country illegally, and they applaud the news that white people are now going to be a minority in the United States. The New York Times thinks that's great, all right, because the oppression brought by white people and Judeo-Christian culture must be obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to obliterate it is to convince all Americans that white men are bad. And that's the philosophy of the paper.
The last piece here is we have suddenly gotten good at doing and turning the tables. We have suddenly gotten good at saying, oh, really? Well, two can play at that game. And there have been a lot of firings. However, there's also been a lot of firings on the other side. And it feels good to point out the hypocrisy of the New York Times, because if this would have been said about any other race by a white person, they would have been fired. And we all know it.
Sure, but the New York Times has shifted into we don't care what Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly and other white men think, because our audience is not that. We are marketing our newspaper to a sliver of the American people who think the way we do. We're not interested in covering the news or finding the truth about anything. We're interested in destroying the current fabric of the country, destroying the president, and getting in another Barack Obama. That's what we're interested in doing, and our readership will uphold it. Now, they're hemorrhaging money over there. Like the despicable New York Daily News, which is just about out of business now, the New York Times is in financial trouble because you can't really run an operation at that level by narrowcasting, which is what they're doing. But it is shocking that this kind of a person would be hired to be on the editorial board, and the paper would defend the person, which they did today.
So what do we – so I said today, first they came for, Kevin Williamson, and they didn't say anything because they weren't Kevin Williamson. We're living the Niemöller poem. I think we are starting to go down this really frightening road of a mob, and we've been going down it for a while. But now both sides are doing it, and it feels really good. But I made a pretty bold declaration in hour number one today. I am not going over the cliff with the rest of humanity, even though it feels really good. What should we be doing as people?
Well, I think the individual American is angry on both sides. So you have that anger, and you have it equally divided. I talked to Victor Davis Hanson yesterday, who's a very, very smart guy.
Yeah.
And that's posted on BillO'Reilly.com if you want to hear that. And he basically said, unlike the Vietnam War, which was maybe 65-35 against the government, most people stood with the government even though they didn't like the war. Now we have 50% of the people who are actively trying to undermine the government, and the other 50% saying that's wrong. So you really have a social civil war here. Now, as far as individuals are concerned, I always tell people you can't justify bad behavior by pointing to other bad behavior. So what you need to do is take the high road in whatever you do.
But people will say, we get our butt kicked. Then they just do what they want.
No, you can expose it and you can challenge it, and it's effective to do that. I mean, why do they think they want to silence voices like mine and yours and other people in the media that go against the progressive movement? Because it is effective. I mean, people do step back and go, you know what? Do I really want a Stalinist society? Do I want a San Francisco telling me where I have to have lunch? Do I really want that? And the answer is no. So you can win the propaganda war in the sense that you can make a stronger case. But it's vicious. I mean, look, just compare Les Moonves to Roger Ailes.
Yeah.
Roger Ailes is dead because he was attacked ceaselessly, mercilessly, okay? And if you stack up allegations, Ailes versus Moonves, it's not even close. Yet Moonves still maintains his job as the head of CBS. I mean, if any fair-minded person just looked, one guy's dead, and the other guy's still doing a conference call on earnings.
Well, I will tell you this. I personally think CBS has been the most rational this week. It's the way Ailes and everybody else should have been dealt with, and that is, what are the facts, independent, and if it is a fair independent, they're listening truly to both sides.
I have no quibble with that.
Right.
Because due process has to be imposed.
Yes.
Okay? But it's not CBS that I'm criticizing. It's the coverage.
Yes. Yes.
It's the news coverage.
Yes.
Okay? So you get one thing is we're going to kill this man, Roger Ailes, and they did. He's dead. But the other guy, we'll criticize him with Me Too. We'll do that. But we're not going to attack his family. I mean,
it is the difference. It is the difference that the media is missing with the Trump coverage. You know, there are things to cover with Donald Trump that aren't good, but they cover absolutely everything like it is, you know, the Ebola virus.
And they don't cover anything that's positive.
Correct.
They don't cover the employment figures in the minority communities and how, you know, a lot of those neighborhoods are being revitalized because now there's work for people who want it. They don't cover that, all right, because that's not in their agenda. Their agenda is to get him out. Their agenda was to kill Fox News.
Okay. I'm going to run out of time here. I've got to ask you one more question, and that is on what's his face that's went to trial this week. What's his name? Manafort. I'm tired of the coverage of this. This is the Manafort story as I understand it and believe it to be. Manafort is a dirty, corrupt guy. He's been dirty and corrupt long before he met Donald Trump. His business dealings are shady. He has dealt with thugs, dictators, and killers. That has nothing to do with Donald Trump. He should most likely go to jail just on what I know, but I'll let a court decide. This is a reasonable trial, but it has nothing to do with collusion and Donald Trump. And that's not the story. The right is saying this guy should never be prosecuted, and the left is saying this proves Donald Trump, and neither of those are true.
Well, I haven't heard anybody on the right saying he hasn't been prosecuted. He shouldn't be prosecuted. I haven't heard that. Because the guy, if he is guilty of not paying taxes on $60 million, I mean, it's, you know, shana na na, hey, goodbye. I mean, that's just the way it is. But there is one element that does attach to Trump, and that's that. And the judge in the case pointed it out verbally. And he said, look, I know what this prosecution is about. It's about getting Manafort to say bad things about Trump for a lighter sentence. That's what it's about.
Right.
And so now the American people know what it's about.
Right. And that is a separate, we conflate everything. That's a separate issue. The guy is dirty, I think, and should go to jail just based on what I've covered this guy for a while. Before he joined Trump. When Trump picked him, I was like, no, really bad guy. So we knew who he was, and he should most likely go to jail if they can prove his guilt. However, that's a separate issue from they're just trying to squeeze him. Because the problem is, he's not the only guy that's dirty. You got guys dirty on the Democratic side that are just as dirty as Manafort.
Sure. I mean, that lobbying thing is just as corrupt as it gets. Cohen's involved with that, too.
Yeah, so is Podesta, who just walks out and closes his business so no questions are asked. Bill O'Reilly, thank you so much for being on the program.
I want to say one real quick thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to delay the release of Killing the SS because I don't want it to coincide with your book on September 18th.
Got to be kidding me. You are not going to believe this. We were talking about delaying the release just because. just because.
You know what? But there's another factor that we'll talk about, I hope, next week.
Okay.
And that's Bob Woodward.
Okay. Good.
Woodward as well. So what's the release date now, Bill?
I don't have a firm one, but I'm not going to compete with Beck on the same week. I told my publisher I don't want to do that.
Yeah, right.
No, I did.
Really? That is really kind of you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is this the week that Bob Woodward's releasing his book?
September 11th, but the New York Times will put it at number one no matter what.
Yes.
Okay.
You're right.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Have a week.
Good. All right. Let me tell you about Casper. He said, I'm not doing it. His book is coming out the week before. He'll be number one, and then I will lose my number one position. It had nothing to do with me. That's the no spin zone.
Glenn Beck.
The best of the Glenn Beck Program.
Glenn Beck.
The best of the Glenn Beck Program.